It is a fascinating exercise to sort of look back on the whole Jurassic experience, because when I think back to when we first started doing Jurassic, we looked at a project that we were in awe of trying to figure out how we were going to execute it.
The first Jurassic became sort of history, this extraordinary puppet technology of Stan Winston's and the CGI stuff of Industrial Light and Magic reached a kind of critical mass. What surprised me, and probably pretty much everyone who worked on the film, was just how swept away one would be by the experience of watching it. I was aware that we were doing something that was probably going to be exciting, but I had no idea how well it would work, or indeed how successful it would be in terms of how many people went to see it, which is a lot.
Ready, and action!
Now, the real challenge is, once you've moved past the novelty of making a movie with things in it that no one's really seen before, how do you sustain the storytelling so that you still preserve the novelty of seeing dinosaurs, but you keep people enthralled in what's going to happen to whomever encounters these dinosaurs? We want the third movie to be as exciting, if not more so, than the other two. And we're pushing ourselves harder than anyone else could push us to make this tremendously exciting.
Is that?
It's a Tyrannosaurus.
I don't think so.
Everybody set. Here we go. Ready, and action!
When we got to the point of realizing that the first movie was such a success, Joe Johnston, who had worked with Steven Spielberg on a number of movies going back to Raiders of the Lost Ark up at ILM, came to Steven and said, if you ever consider doing a second Jurassic, could I do it? And Steven said, Joe, I think I'm going to do the second one, but if I do a third, you're my first choice. So when we decided to do the third movie, Steven immediately went to Joe.
This is one of the great franchises of all time, and I love the Jurassic Park movies. And I also was very flattered that Steven would ask me to do it. It's a lot of trust that he's placing in me. It's a huge responsibility.
I've chartered an airplane to fly us over Isla Sorna, and we'd like you to be our guide.
We spent a great deal of time trying to think, what story can we come up with that's going to take people back to a place that I think will allow them to have a good time, but at the same time it feels new and exciting and hopefully original.
We have a landing strip up ahead. You want me to put it down?
No. I told you I want to circle first, see the whole island.
What do you mean set it down? You can't land here. What are you talking about?
Hold on. I can explain.
You cannot land on this island.
It's a rescue mission, primarily. A divorced couple's child is lost on the island through a parasailing accident. This divorced couple has to reunite and pretend to be married so that they can lure Alan Grant into helping them find their son. They think he's been on this island before. He hasn't. They basically trick him, kidnap him, get him on the island, and then find out that he's never been there before.
I have never been on this island.
Sure you have. You wrote that book.
That was Isla Nublar. This is Isla Sorna. Site B.
Alan Grant, of course, hasn't been near a live dinosaur since he got off that island by the skin of his teeth all those years ago. Now he's clearly older and gnarlier. Certainly wouldn't have gone back to Jurassic Park voluntarily, having had a horrendous experience the first time. So it's really by nefarious means that he gets there at all. And he certainly wants to get off as soon as he possibly can. It's no fun, running for your life.
Dr. Grant? Paul Kirby, Kirby Enterprises. I just had a daughter, and the idea of being able to do a Jurassic Park, which I know she will see, just was irresistible. It's one of the great franchises of all times, and it's turned out to be such a fabulous experience.
I was very interested in doing a movie that would have epic special effects that would be even more spectacular. And I knew going into this that we have the technological advantage that given 10 years, the improvements that have been made with CGI, with the animatronics, are really astounding. So this will stand on its own in many ways.
Every character should be interesting and watchable and should have something about them that makes them interesting, you know.
I think we've put together an ensemble group where we've once again returned to the notion of civilians being on the island. So now we have the everyman returning to the island.
When I first began to talk with the director, Joe Johnston, about sort of the look of the film, and he had some very specific ideas. Now, Joe wanted this jungle to look a little bit more primordial. So rather than it being all lush and green and shiny and pretty, what we're going to try to do is to make it look a little bit more old, a little bit more kind of rotten, a little bit more sort of swampy.
The jungle on stage 12 was the single biggest set that Ed had to design, and it's the one that's in the movie more than anything, you know. There are shots that we did on stage 12 that it looks like you're outside, it looks like you're on location in Hawaii. The first time I looked at the movie, when we finally got it all together, I mean, I had to stop and think, is that Hawaii or is that stage 12? Because it intercuts, you know, so seamlessly. That is Ed Verreau, but it's also Shelley Johnson, the DP, who was able to take that set on stage 12 and make it look 2 or 3 times bigger than it really was, just with lighting.
To be very honest, my job started very early when they were just trying to get the idea of the movie. And I came in and I actually got to come up with some of the animals and some of the storyline.
How would you classify it, Billy?
Well, it's a super predator. When we were trying to put the story together, we wanted something different. And Tyrannosaurus Rex had sort of been in charge of the first 2 movies. This time we wanted something that was actually going to replace T-Rex, and so we actually went after a dinosaur that literally could cause an extinction on the island. And the Spinosaurus is and was the biggest meat-eating dinosaur that ever lived.
The Spinosaurus was discovered, I believe it was in the late 1800s in the Middle East. And the largest example was about 56 feet long. The largest of the T-Rexes is about 45, 46 feet. There was no doubt that Spinosaurus was a predator. The Spinosaurus looks a lot different from T-Rex. It's got about a 5-foot long jaw. It has a very crocodile-looking snout. Spinosaurus also has a sail on his back that stands about 7 feet tall.
From what Jack says, this was a carnivorous, lethal, flesh-eating creature that was bigger than the Tyrannosaurus and had even larger claws that were more useful than those embarrassing little spindly arms that the T-Rex has. Because the T-Rex was essentially just a big mouth, as far as I could tell. And this is just a more effective killing machine in every way.
In addition to that, we're dealing with pteranodons, and I think the audience for a long time has been hoping that we would bring flying dinosaurs into this genre. And we had a perfect opportunity to do that with this. So we did, again, a lot of work with Jack to analyze just how big these things got, and they were quite enormous and quite scary. And we put together a fairly intense scene that probably defines this movie as being what's different from the other 2.
The Pteranodon is one of the things that Hammond's company was doing without telling anybody about it. They were hatching a lot of different dinosaurs that they didn't admit to, and when they moved out, they basically left the cages open and everybody got on the boats and planes and got out of there as quick as they could. So there are a lot of things running around that nobody knows about.
Oh my God.
What is it?
It's a bird cage.
For what?
The fascinating thing about why I think these movies have worked so effectively is that they still utilize all the tools of special effects. What Stan Winston Studios has continued to do is they keep moving the bar with regard to what they're doing in the world of animatronics and puppetry. And Stan Winston's studio and the people who work there have brought a tremendous amount to the believability of these characters.
It starts on the drawing, it starts in sketches, color renderings, maquette, sculpture, and then I walk in and I go, whoa, you've changed him. And so from drawings to sculptures to maquettes, new ideas are birthed as we develop. In Jurassic Park III, I believe my favorite new dinosaur is the Velociraptor. And the Velociraptor was in Jurassic Park I. And the Velociraptor was in Lost World. And the Velociraptor is back in Jurassic Park III, but in a way we've never seen it.
Get behind me.
You start thinking of them as being other personalities on the set. It takes at least 12 people to work each of these creatures, and so they are a combination of the intelligence of those people that are working them.
It's literally amazing. It's like they really look real. And it's really fun being able to work with animatronics and doing the CGI, because I really have never done anything like that before.
There's something quite humbling about working on a set where it's the best of the best doing their very best. Stan Winston's dinosaurs here, I mean, this is the pinnacle. Nobody anywhere in the galaxy can do this better than he can.
The way the Spinosaurus and the Raptor were controlled were telemetry devices, which is a machine that resembles the shape of the other dinosaurs, where you have a head and you can twist and turn it, and it makes the head twist and turn or move the body around. Then you have separate people on arm telemetry devices. On the Spinosaur, they're actually strapped into it so that they move it around, and what they do is translated to the dinosaur. When you're figuring out how it's going to be done, these different methods come about.
Action, Raptor.
Walking legs, for example, with the Raptor, which I actually wear and fit inside. We go through each sequence and sort of figure out if we could make these legs move this way, where it's human-powered with extensions on it, and then they can lift and take a step. Or this should be a total hydraulic puppet, because you're going to see it from the knees up, and it's going to be basically planted.
One of the first things that Stan Winston told me when I was going to be working with one of his puppets, he said, I would keep in mind, though, these can kill you. You're not working with hand puppets or things like that, socks on your hands. I mean, these are big machines, and they're very strong, they're very powerful, and they can do great harm to you.
Spinosaurus is the guy on the block from this point on. We have a big fight, and T-Rex gets his ass kicked.
We knew that, there was going to be a T-Rex Spino battle in this movie. And the truth of the matter is, we knew we were going to break something. The Spino literally ripped the T-Rex's head right off, because this Spinosaur was so big and bad and powerful. There was just literally no contest between the machines, much less the real animals.
3, 2, 1, drop!
Our director, Joe Johnston, decided that he wanted to have an airplane crash. And one of the interesting things that you'll see is you will see the principal actors in the airplane.
We haven't landed yet.
Rather than stay very wide and do something CG or try to do something with doubles, we had to design a tree that really was a gimbal that we could put the airplane into and be able to move it around, tilt it, shake it, slide them in and out. In all, we had 3 separate types of planes. We had one that would crush from the outside, one that would crush from the inside, one that would roll, and a 4th one being one that would sit in the tree and rock back and forth and complete the crash. So through the combination of editing this all together, it looks like one plane.
The cast was in that airplane for weeks. It had to crash, first of all, with them inside of it. Then they escape and run for their lives. But they agreed to do all of those stunts themselves.
We were in the fuselage of this airplane, and Spinosaurus, our old friend Spiny, rolls it across the soundstage, and there was nothing to be done except we got in this thing and just got our asses rolled. It's like spending the afternoon in the dryer. We were banged up.
There's one shot in that entire sequence where there are stunt people. Everything else is done, by the actors.
In terms of preparation, Joe said this is probably going to be the most physical film that you've done. There's no question about that. It's been actually quite demanding physically. And so I had to sort of buff myself up a bit.
I so wish I had been advised to go get out there and start lifting weights and start sprinting and for God's sake start stretching, because we're out here doing these insane little gists where we're going from this side of the stage to the other as fast as we can over rocks and balls. And I tell you, more of the makeup is to cover what you've gotten along the way rather than creating the ones for the job.
There's no question that I think all action-adventure movies today are enormously difficult because the audience expects a tremendous amount now. And in order to deliver that, you're asking people to really push the bar continually on what it is you're trying to do.
Falls Lake was the toughest part of the whole thing, I think, because it had to be at night in the rain, and it involved not only the dinosaur, but fire and smoke and all that stuff.
This is a big and powerful machine. We're talking about 1,000 horsepower. They've got the Spinosaur diving into the friggin' lake. I mean, come on. I mean, he acts in the water. And I must tell you that some of the most dramatic, real-life images I have ever seen are of the Spinosaur in the water. I mean, it is some of the most incredible footage I've ever seen. This animal is alive, and he's in the water going after people underwater.
When you work with the animatronics, it's terrifying. On the other side, there's some hysterical footage of us running through fields away from, well, nothing.
Many times in almost every movie, sooner or later, you just have to pretend. We had to run away from imaginary dinosaurs, and we had to see imaginary dinosaurs. And you just make it up. And it's been amazing to watch these computer guys, men and women, setting up the shots so that they can put the dinosaurs in later.
Basically, everything's new. We've got a bunch of new creatures in the way of the pteranodons, the Spinosaurus, the ankylosauruses, and we're doing new fun things with them. I think Joe's made it a fun, action-packed film where you're traveling across the island and there are all these encounters with the different dinosaurs.
In this film, more than any of the other ones, we had a chance to have our computer-generated dinosaurs interact with Stan Winston's animatronic dinosaurs. In the other films, you know, we cut from ours to a cutaway of his. In this one, they can actually make physical contact.
Actually, in the dinosaur fight sequence where we have Stan's T-Rex lunging forward and you see the computer-generated Spinosaurus come from behind and actually bite into its neck. I don't think anybody's going to be able to tell whose is whose, you know, whether it's a CG or an animatronic.
We did it in the Pteranodon sequence as well. And again, the match is flawless. Unless you knew what you were looking for, you probably couldn't tell which was which.
I'm sitting here, but there's 200 people behind me that's working on this movie, and it's an amazing crew.
The process of putting computer-generated dinosaurs on the screen starts with the tactile art of sculpture. That's actually where the design phase of the dinosaur takes place. Once those sculptures and maquettes are done, we get them here at ILM. We scan those sculptures, and then from the scanned data, we can go into the computer and rebuild them. Once the geometry or the outer surface is created, we have to introduce all the animation controls into that geometry so the animators can get in there and manipulate it and can move it, can animate it. What we did early on in this production was to produce believable skin and muscle under the skin, the jiggle of the skin. There was ways we did it in the other films, but it was pretty painful. We wanted it to be a process that was dynamic. In other words, if the leg slammed down, we wanted to see stuff jiggle the way it would and have it happen from dynamic forces that they can generate within the computer.
And then the compositors take all those elements and make them look like those computer-generated images belong in the real live action plate. So it's a huge process, but it requires amazing talent.
We entered a new era with Jurassic Park III in that we can focus more on the craft and the artistry of effects and animation. The tools are known now. Now all the focus and energy goes more into the craft of making these images. And I believe with Jurassic Park III, you're going to see performance beyond what you've seen in the other movies.
They set a trap. They actually set a trap.
Ready and action!
Joe's wanted to do this for a long, long time, and this is his opportunity to take the reins from somebody like Steven Spielberg, which is not an easy thing to do. Find his own vision, find his own movie, take all those years of experience in effects and try to make an absolutely phenomenal, fast-paced, exciting Jurassic Park III, and I think he pulled that off incredibly well.
You look at these dinosaurs, they look real. And then you put this kind of effects team together, the team from ILM and the team from Stan Winston Studio, and you have sort of an unbeatable mix that there's no reason why this shouldn't look and feel beyond anything we've seen in the previous movies.
I personally am very interested in history and prehistory too. I don't think you can ever learn enough about that stuff. But to blend it in with fiction like this is a kick.
The audiences love a walloping good tale well told. The audience basically wants to know what happens next, and this is an adventure film. I mean, it's intense.
The film takes off really quickly, and it doesn't slow. There's barely a moment's rest.
I love having done it, and now that it's finished, I think it's going to be the kind of movie that it needs to be, which is one that's very entertaining and it's going to sell a lot of popcorn.
You probably won't get off this island alive.